You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
In an interview with SFX, Helen Mirren, 77-year-old actress, spoke about the bond she has developed with her castmates Rachel Zegler and Lucy Liu, who play fellow Daughters of Atlas in the upcoming Shazam sequel. Now, she came up with a name for the three women together. And I'm going to tell you about it. I'm going to read the quote, but for the sake of censorship, it will be read in the voice of Sean Connery. It's a brilliant piece of casting. We absolutely bonded as a group. I called us Pussy Power, and we'll be sisters for the rest of our lives. We're constantly emailing each other. We would go out shopping together. We'd go out for dinner together. We had a grand time. Stay tuned for the Dan Wickline Show. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. It is Wednesday, February 22nd, 0222, and we've got a lot to cover today. As I promised, today we're going to do a deep dive into Kang and his variants. So we're going to cover just a little bit of history, but I'm going to give you an idea of who each of these variants are and how we've already seen them in the MCU, if we have that type of stuff. But I've also got some news to cover. So I'm going to jump right in. Hello to Cool, hello to Triple B, and to John. Good to see you guys. So if I don't do a whole lot of interacting with you guys, it's because I have done a ton of research and I want to give you all this information. So let's start off, though, with some news. I got 2 bits of Wonder Man news. Now, Stella Maggie, who helmed the photograph, well, she's been set to direct an episode of the Marvel Studios Disney Plus series Wonder Man, starring Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. And it's believed that she will helm multiple episodes for the series, as will Daniel Destin Cretton do. And he's also the producer on the show, along with Kevin Feige, and Andrew Guest is serving as the head writer. Now, that's from Deadline. I consider that pretty much confirmation. There's a rumor going around that Marvel is looking at Rampage actor Demetrius Gross as possibly playing Eric Williams, the brother of the titular Simon Williams, aka Wonder Man. And Eric is also the villain Grim Reaper, who first appeared in Avengers number 52 in 1968 by Roy Thomas and John Buscema. Well, Eric becomes the Grim Reaper after he believes his brother has died. Now, the character carries this scythe that can actually put people into a coma. And this was originally created by the Tinkerer, but then upgraded by Ultron, like you would. But the actor, Gross, has also appeared in Straight Outta Compton, the movie Banshee, the TV series Justified. Remember Heroes? He was in that. Westworld and Fear the Walking Dead. So you guys got a good pedigree. And if he is cast, that's going to be cool. So, all right, we're going to move on. We got award news to cover. Warner Brother and DC's The Batman leads all nominations for the 3rd annual Critics' Choice Super Awards, which revealed nominees Wednesday for this year's best. Basically these guys give awards for superhero movies, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and action genre. And they do break it down that way. So action movies have a category, superhero movies have a category. Horror movies have a category. Sci-fi, fantasy have a horror. So everything is broken down. So you're not having like Avatar competing against Top Gun Maverick. Now, Matt Reeves' refurbished Batman, which starred Robert Pattinson, has 6 nominations overall, including Best Superhero Movie, 3 Best Actors. They don't do actor and supporting actor, but they have 3 Best Actors, including Pattinson, Paul Dano, and Colin Farrell. Zoe Kravitz is up for Best Actress in a superhero movie, and Dano is also up for Best Villain. Now, Disney's Marvel's Black Panther Wakanda Forever has 5 nominations on the film side, with leading Oscar pick Everything Everywhere All at Once with 4 nominees. So the winners of these will be revealed on March 16th. And having watched the Oscars and stuff recently, and the BAFTAs and all that, this is a much better show to me because it's giving awards to the movies that I watch. We got a little bit of Venom news, and it is just a squeaker of a news, but Tom Hardy has posted a deleted scene from the last Venom movie. But on his Instagram, he's also mentioned that the 3rd film is now in pre-production. While we don't know much about it, we do know that Kelly Marcel, who wrote the screenplays for the first 2 movies, will be back to write the script and direct the 3rd movie. Originally, the first film was directed by Ruben Fleischer, and the second was by Andy Serkis. Back in June of 2022, Hardy seemed to confirm that the script for Venom 3 was already completed. So this thing is moving along. Even though we haven't gotten much buzz on it, it is in production. We don't know who the villain's going to be or any of that stuff yet, but it's happening. And then in Marvel-related news, and this just came out, industry insider Casey Walsh, and Casey is a very reliable insider, usually talks about things going on schedules and stuff. Obviously, they get a hold of, certain production schedule things. Well, on Twitter, they posted that Shang-Chi 2 and Eternals 2 have both been added to the Marvel Studios production calendar. Now, I know it's not really a surprise that the successful Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is getting a sequel, but some of you might be a little more surprised about the lukewarm received Eternals. I, on the other hand, haven't. I was expecting an Eternals 2 movie because I think they're setting some good stuff up, but also Kevin Feige is the double down king. When you guys don't like something, he doubles down on it. Trevor Slattery, Thor the Dark World, anything that that the fans have come out and said, "Oh, we don't like that." He goes, "Really? Have some more. Have some more. Have some more," until people start going, "Oh, Trevor Slattery is going to be in Wonder Man. This is great." Didn't we hate Trevor Slattery back in Iron Man 3? He was redeemed by Shang-Chi and the Marvel short, don't remember the title of it, the Once and Future King, I think it was. So, all right, that is our news for the day. Yeah, that's Kevin Feige. JD says, I like that you didn't like that? Interesting. You're wrong. That's Kevin Feige, and it's worked. It has absolutely worked. All right, guys. Are you ready for the deep dive? Are you ready to get your Kang gang knowledge on? I have done the research like crazy on this. So, the publication of He Who Would Be Kang actually started in the Fantastic Four number 19, published in October of 1963. Except he wasn't first introduced as Kang. He was introduced as the pharaoh named Rama-Tut. Now, he would then appear again in Fantastic Four Annual number 2, published in September of 1964. And later that same month, Rama-Tut travels to the future and changes his name to Kang the Conqueror in the pages of Avengers number 8. And then 2 months later, in Avengers number 10, a character named Immortus is introduced that would later be retconned into being a future version of Kang. So when Immortus showed up, he wasn't even planned on being part of the Kang gang. Now, we would learn, and that would come out in Giant Size Avengers number 3 in 1975. So his retcon takes place 8 years later. He would also take on many other names. And I know JD is trying to put up the images. I'm going to spend more time on each of these guys in a minute. I'm just kind of hitting the highlights. He would also take on the name Scarlet Centurion in 1968 in Avengers Annual number 2. Victor Timely in Avengers Annual 21 in 1992. He'd become Iron Lad in Young Avengers number 1 in April 2005. Kung Fu Panda. Nice, JD. He would take on the name Chrono Monitor number 616 in the Marvel Adventures Fantastic Four number 23 in August of 2007. And the most recent variation is Mr. Griffin, who appeared in the all-new, all-different Avengers number 1 in November of 2015. Now, in the comics, he hasn't used the name He Who Remains, but that is how we first meet him in the MCU. Now, let's break these characters down in order that they appeared, and I'll explain how they appear in the MCU so far. But we should really start at the very beginning, before he took on any of these names. He was Nathaniel Richards, a 31st century scholar and descendant of Reed Richards, a.k.a. Mr. Fantastic. But he wasn't actually a descendant of Reed Richards, more so his father, Nathaniel Richards. And so, not a direct descendant of Reed, but one branch over on the family tree. Now, Nathaniel becomes fascinated with history and discovers the time travel technology of Victor Von Doom. We would find out later that Von Doom might also be an ancestor of Kangs. And with this technology, we jump to his first alter ego. Now, that, of course, is Pharaoh Rama-Tut. Now, Nathaniel travels back in time to ancient Egypt, 2960 BC, if you're trying to create a timeline here. And he does so in a sphinx-shaped time ship, where he used his technology to become the Pharaoh. Now, they would later tie in, this is an interesting point in Marvel history because they really just kind of crammed in a bunch of other stories into the same moment. One of which is, of course, in Saba-Nur, the mutant who would become Apocalypse, who would become his potential heir. But that would be a retcon and not the initial appearance. His rule as Pharaoh is cut short by a time-displaced Fantastic Four team who are looking for a magical herb, like you do, which just sounds like it's a pot run at that point, doesn't it? Now, they were able to defeat him. The short version is the team were brought before Rama-Tut, and the 3 male members were enslaved, and like every villain in the 1960s, he decided to take Sue Storm as his bride. Now, this was a very busy time in ancient Egypt, as not only were the FF there, and Apocalypse was running around, but Marvel also retconned in stories involving Doctor Strange, searching for a soul shard of a friend, and of the West Coast Avengers who'd been displaced in time and were trying to find access to the time machine so they could get home. So you can see this period has become very convoluted. But the important part of the story is that the Thing breaks free, or is mystically freed by Doctor Strange, depending on which comic you're reading, and is able to free the others and defeat Rama-Tut. Now, the West Coast Avenger, no, I'm sorry, you're right. The FF found the herb they were looking for, headed home. Doctor Strange found the shard, and the West Coast Avengers found their way home as well. And Saba-Nur's mutant powers manifested around the same time, turning him into Apocalypse, all while Rama-Tut bailed back to the future. While this is the main gist of the version, his other appearances don't play as big a part of his overall story. The characters appeared in the MCU first as an Easter egg. So the first time we see him in the MCU, He's an Easter egg. He's a design on the back of a guy's jacket, one of the young Egyptians who is picking a fight with Jake Lockley in the Moon Knight series. Now, more recently, and again, there might be some spoilers here, he appears at the end credit scene of Quantumania as one of the three main variants talking about Kang. He's the one with the Pharaoh's hat on. Pretty straightforward. Now, where we go next is a few options. Because, again, these weren't necessarily done chronologically. You know, they jumped all over the place. So what I think we're going to go with is the Scarlet Centurion. Now, having been defeated, Nathaniel tries to go home, but a time storm, some kind of time storm, I don't know what a time storm is, but a time storm ends up stranding him in the 20th century, where he just happens to meet Dr. Doom, who he is led to believe is his ancestor and the creator. And of course, Doom is the creator of the time technology that he's using. Now, this chance meeting with Doom inspires him to drop the Ramatut persona and build himself a suit of armor. And they say it's a suit of armor designed similar to Dr. Doom's, but if you see a picture of it, it's got like an open chest and arms. Is that the one you got? Oh, no, they closed it up on that picture. Okay. At first, it's got like this open chest and arms thing, which is very not Dr. Doom. And he takes on the name the Scarlet Centurion. In an attempt to conquer the modern era, he went into the Avengers past and used his technology to convince the early Avengers team, prior to Hulk leaving, that the Earth was doomed unless they could stop the growing population of superhumans. Now, this created an alternate timeline, making Earth 689. And you got to understand that every time Kang does one of these time jumps, he's basically creating an alternate timeline. He is single-handedly filling the multiverse. But in Earth 689, and once his Avengers were the only game in town, he decided to use them to defeat the main Earth team by the 616. By the way, that's what they call the main Earth in comics is 616. And once his Avengers were the only game in town, by tricking them into coming to the new Earth. So basically, he convinces the Avengers to come to the new Earth, the 689 Earth. And once there, the main Avengers figure out what happens, and they're actually able to search that globe to find pieces of the time platform that Centurion had hidden. We're able to defeat the 689 team and force the Centurion back into the time stream, where he finally and then they return themselves home. And Nathaniel Richards, in the future, now before we leave Scarlet Centurion to the next character, he would give up the title shortly after getting his butt kicked, but his son Marcus would eventually take on that guise. And I'm not going to go into how much Marcus does as a Scarlet Centurion unless they introduce him in the MCU, but you can see that it's carried on. Now, the Centurion has not been officially seen in the MCU yet, but some think that maybe the cybernetic looking guy was him. Now, there's also in the post-credit scene a guy wearing a big flowing red cape in the big stadium scene. My guess is that's more likely him than this other one. I'm not sure who the cybernetic looking one was. For all I know, he could be the what was the name of the guy? The Chrono Monitor 616. So, I mean, there's no telling who he's going to be because he's not in Scarlet. He's not really in armor. He's more of a cybernetic character. So I'm going to, assume that that's the case there. All right. We're going to take our first break before we move on. So let's do a short break and we'll come back and get right into it. Be right back.
Why was Princess Zelda sad after watching a bunch of YouTube videos? She couldn't find a link in the description. We'll stop if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's super easy. Click subscribe and click the bell when you do. And thanks for supporting the EXP. What if Hans Gruber from Die Hard had to battle the Joker from Batman the Animated Series in a dance battle? Or who would win in a race between Baby from Baby Driver and Snidely Whiplash? If Austin Powers and Shrek found themselves in a hot dog eating contest, who would emerge victorious? These are the questions we talk about on Nerd Killer Warfare. Debate the most absurd questions you've ever heard in popular culture. Register now by scanning the QR code or visiting bit.ly/EXP casting.
Imagine being at a convention and going to an interview panel that's just for you. No bustling crowds, no hours-long lines, just you, the moderator, and your favorite comic book creators. Well, this is pretty much that. Miss Jen sits down every week with 2 comic book creators for a live stream interview about their latest work, and you can ask them whatever you want. It's Talking Shop, Mondays at 5 Eastern on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. Hello to Kenneth, I see you've popped in. We are doing a deep dive into Kang the Conqueror and all his variants. Remember to stick around. We've got comic collectibles coming up right after this. And then we've got some new shows starting off tonight. We have 3T, which is Talk and something trivia. And but it's basically they interview Pat Shand and we'll give you clues to a trivia question. If you get the trivia question right, you could win some Pat Shand books. After that, we have our second episode of 360 Comics. The internet or the Instagram sensation has moved over here to The Experience. And then late night we have Kicking It with Henri. So you want to stick around for that. All right, we're going to dive back into our deep dive here. By the way, just so you guys know, if you've ever waited for health to freeze over, we're getting blizzard warnings here on TVs in Los Angeles. It's never happened. So just so you know, we might be there. All right, let's get back into it. Now, after the Scarlet Centurion is defeated, Nathaniel tries to return to the 31st century, but he overshoots just a tad bit by 1,000 years, ends up in a war-torn Earth filled with soldiers using advanced weapons that they no longer understand. This is where he becomes Kang the Conqueror. This time on Earth is easy to take over, and Nathaniel changes his name to Kang the Conqueror, but this Earth is also dying, so he decides to use his new technology to take over an earlier time on Earth, when the world was more fertile. From there, he would move on to conquering the galaxy, but this wasn't good enough for him. Having been defeated by the heroes of the modern era or the present day, he decided to conquer that as well. Now, part of this came from the story of the Celestial Madonna, who would sire the most powerful man in history, and Kang wanted to find the Madonna and be the father of that child. Now, I've talked about this whole storyline previously on the show about Mantis and how the reveal that she's related to Star-Lord and therefore Ego, the living planet, a celestial, could be important. So I covered all that. So if you guys go back on YouTube and find that one, you'll get that. But so Kang becomes obsessed with finding the Celestial Madonna. So Kang returns to the modern day, in his ship. And just outside of Washington, D.C., he tussles with the army for a bit, demanding to see the rulers of this era. And the government goes, hey, Avengers, can you go deal with this? So the Avengers step in. But Kang was easily able to defeat them. He captured all but two. Wasp avoided being captured at all and escaped. And Captain America actually was able to break free and started to fight back. But Kang realizes that Cap was a man out of time and sent him back to 1945. Now, Wasp and Cap's young friend Rick Jones, and Rick Jones is a great character in Marvel, pops up all over the place. Here he's running with Captain America. They enlist the aid of Mr. Fantastic and are able to go back in time and retrieve Cap and bring him back to the present day. And then Rick and his teen brigade convince Kang they want to join him. But once they're allowed on the ship, they find a way to free the other Avengers. And the team are able to confront Kang and severely damage his armor, forcing him to flee back to his own time once again. Now, on this trip back, before he heads back, he sends out a probe specifically set to find the Celestial Madonna. Also, Kang wouldn't discover it until later, but each one of the time jumps, and this is what I mentioned earlier, was starting to create other variations of Kang. Now, this isn't the end of Kang's story, but we're going to sidetrack here, as it was about this time that a different version of Kang appeared, a very interesting one named Victor Timely. Now, having just suffered this humiliating defeat, one of those Kangs decides to set up a beachhead in the 20th century for future conquering of the modern age. And he went back to January 1st, 1901, and established the town of Timely, Wisconsin. He took the name Victor Timely, and he ended up becoming the mayor, set up a business, and began teaching robotics to the locals. Now, this would go on to establish Chronopolis. Chronopolis is the city that Kang works out of. It's kind of what we see in the quantum realm in the movie. Now, first, it's just a fortress that's out of sync with time. But eventually, it becomes this crossroad outside of times itself, where past, present, and future can all come into at the same time. Now, because he wants to keep the Victor Timely persona going and running this town, he would eventually swap. He would have the robots appear to age, and Victor Timely would get old and die, and everything would be handed over to Victor Timely Jr., another robot. And then it would eventually go on to Victor Timely III, etc., and so forth. Now, some of the things that he did as Victor Timely, he didn't do a whole lot of trying to beat people up. He just was building Chronopolis. But at one point, he employed Phineas Horton, and a few of you may know who he is. He would go on to develop the technology that brought the original Human Torch to life, or the android torch, or however you want to, Professor Horton's amazing discovery. We get a glimpse of the torch and the name Horton in the Captain America movie, Captain America, the First Avenger. Now, the technology created by the Timely would also end up being part of Reed Richards' creations. They would be part of Detective Misty Knight's robotic arm, and they were even used in the construction of Deathlock. Now, it appears that Victor Timely is going to be an important part of the MCU, specifically Loki Season 2, because that's the other end credit scene where we see Loki and Mobius in Quantumania, and they're in this small town back in the 1900s, and they're looking at Victor Timely. So expect to see that version of him pop up quite a bit. Actually, what I'm hearing about Loki is that there'll be multiple versions, but Timely will be one of the first. Now, let's return to Kang, already in progress. Back in his own time, Kang falls in love with a princess named Ravonna, one of his subjects, or she's from one of the subject kingdoms that he has. Now, she doesn't return his affection at first. And to prove his might, because that's what future princesses seem to like, he decides to kidnap the Avengers and is able to subdue them and a couple of rebellious kingdoms with the help of his army. But when he won't actually execute Ravonna, his commanders revolt, and Kang is forced to free the Avengers and get them to help him take out his own army. Comics are weird, aren't they, sometimes? Now, during the fight, somebody tries to shoot Kang. Ravonna leaps in front of it and is mortally wounded, saving Kang's life. And it's that moment that she realizes she must actually love him. Now, Kang returns the Avengers to their time, since they had helped him, and he puts Ravonna in a stasis in hopes of finding a way to save her. Now, Kang would soon come across that possible way to save her. And this is one of the interesting stories. It involves the Grandmaster. Hey, Slipknot. Now, the Grandmaster makes a deal with Kang. He says, if you play a game with me and you win, I will give you the power over life and death. And, of course, he chooses the Avengers to be the pawns in this game, because Kang just has a real hang-up with the Avengers. Now, there's 2 battles. And the first one, the Avengers are losing, but are aided by the Black Knight, who isn't aware of what the circumstances of the battle are, but he helps the Avengers and they win the fight. The second fight, the Avengers win clearly, no doubt about it. So the Grandmaster says, well, you won the second one, but the first one was interfered with, so you don't get that one. Therefore, instead of the power over life and death, you can have the power over life or over death. And he decides, instead of saving Ravonna, he chooses death so he could kill the Avengers. And oh, thank you, Triple B. And glad you got home. So he chooses death and uses his power to start to kill the Avengers. But again, he's not thinking, and the Black Knight stops him from killing them, and he loses the power, and the Avengers kick his ass. Now, the Black Knight at this point isn't an Avenger, and that's the key to this whole thing, is he wasn't an Avenger when he helped, and he wasn't an Avenger when he saved him, but they make him an Avenger shortly afterwards. Now, let's see, JD says, 10 to 8 rounds for the Avengers, so it's 18 Avengers going to the third round. Pretty much. Now, later, Kang would show up at the Avenger Mansion, having deduced that Mantis was the Celestial Madonna, as I talked about in the other show, and demanded to marry her, because it's what he does. The heroes are aided by an older version of Kang, who has returned to his Ramatut guise. So at some point, this version of Kang tires out of conquests and wants to live a more, less dangerous life or less violent life, and decides to come back and try to counsel his younger self and help the Avengers stop him from getting Mantis. Now, the Avengers and Ramatut are able to defeat Kang, but it ends up costing the swordsman's life. Now, we've seen Mantis in the Guardians of the Galaxy, and we've seen Swordsman in Hawkeye. But I don't think we're going to get the Celestial Madonna story playing out exactly how it does in the comics. They might do it, and they have set it up, but I think that's not going to happen with Swordsman, because that character is definitely not the one we get in the comics. Yeah, Kang takes a lot of interesting variations. We also have met Ravonna before. Now, Ravonna wasn't a princess where we've met her. She is, of course, Judge Ravonna Renslayer of the TVA in the Loki series. And she's still around and is likely to be back in season 2. Now, while they're fighting, they end up going into limbo. And in limbo, Rama-Tut discovers that the future incarnation of both Kang and Rama-Tut is named Immortus. They were playing MODOK for humor. If you've just seen the metal mask, he does get that taken off and he does have the giant head. But they're playing it more for humor. Now, Immortus, so the story here is Rama-Tut comes across Immortus while battling Kang in limbo. This future version came out as he grew older. Nathaniel began seeking a way to achieve immortality and began studying the timeless realm of limbo where he could live forever. He decided to retire there and learn the mastery of time. He took on the guise of Immortus and built himself a fortress. Again, like you do. Now, there he was confronted by the Timekeepers. So yeah, the Timekeepers that we meet in Loki do exist in comics. Now, the Timekeepers decide that they're going to tutor him in the secrets of time as their apprentice and give him like this 7 millennia area to watch over. Now, his primary job was to clean up the messes that his Kang variants make. He was also to guide time so that it would end with the Timekeepers at the end of time, similar to what the TVA is doing in Loki. Oh yeah, fortress construction is just no problem. You can build a chronopolis or a fortress all over the place. Now, so yeah, he's basically making the sacred timeline. They also made him a singular being in the time stream at that point. So where there's variants of Kang and Rama-Tut and stuff like that, there is only one Immortus. Now, one of the first things Immortus did was to create a time storm. This may sound familiar. The time storm that forced Rama-Tut into landing in the 20th century when he was escaping ancient Egypt. So you can see the time storm that knocked him off course was actually done by himself. This way he could meet Dr. Doom. Now, unlike the Timekeepers, Immortus preferred to use manipulation and trickery over their violence and death methods and to maintain the proper course of time. Going into the full history of Immortus could take us multiple episodes. I mean, I could do multiple shows on Immortus alone. So we're going to ease out of his past. But let's say that he shows up a lot and he's a major player in any time there's a Nexus being involved. He shows up involving the Scarlet Witch. I mean, it's just crazy. Oh, they made MODOK bald. He's never been bald in the comics, has he? Also, MODOK never had his classic bushy black eyebrows. No, it's because they tie him into another character. He's not the exact MODOK. They do change him. But I don't want to ruin that till you see Quantumania. So, now we see Immortus in the end credit scene as the one who seems to kind of be in charge. He often goes against Kang in the comics, and it looks like he's going to do the same in the MCU. Now, where do we do that on time? All right, let's do one more. Another interesting and very different version of Kang is also the most recently created. Now, that's Mr. Griffin. He's a version of Kang that got trapped in the 21st century by some kind of time firewall. Maybe Immortus had to do with that too. And he was unwilling to wait 2,000 years to catch up with his original era. So this Nathaniel decides to make his own dynasty in this time period, and he took on a new name, Mr. Griffin. And he starts a business called Kang Enterprises, Kang spelled Qeng. and he enlists several villains from that era to help his empire grow. Now, he also buys Stark Tower or Avengers Tower, and he becomes an ally with a Chitauri warrior named Warbringer. Together with Warbringer, they work to get an artifact that would open up a portal for an awaiting armada of Chitauri. Now, a group of heroes band together to stop them. There is no Avengers at this point. And they would stay together to form the new Avengers. They would force him out of the time stream. And while we haven't seen Mr. Griffin in the MCU, unless he just happened to be one of the extra Kangs hanging about, we did see a hint of him in the ruins of Stark Avengers Tower. You know, in the episode of Loki where they go to the limbo area where they meet the other Lokis, Alligator Loki and stuff like that. Well, you see this fallen over Avengers Tower, but it says King Enterprises on it. We also see, by the way, a Sphinx in there with a nose, and that is supposed to be Kang's time machine. So there's a lot of references in there. So now in the MCU, we do know that Stark Tower or Avengers Tower has been sold, but we don't know of yet to whom. So this could also be a way that they bring Kang into the MCU. All right, we're going to take our final break real quick, and we'll come back. We'll hit a few more Kangs and then wrap things up. So be right back.
Did you know that every experience show, including some exclusive content, streams on Twitch? Check it out, twitch.tv/the_EXP. Or just scan that QR code.
Comic Collectibles is here for you every Wednesday with AR Comics for two very important reasons. To sell you rare, one-of-a-kind comics that you'll love, and to confuse AR with old man talk. You see, Rex and John are, how should I put this, ancient as the roots of the mountains. So every week, Rex and John fill in AR in yet another area of pop culture that he missed because he's too young, just didn't have the time, or just really doesn't care about. It's a real public service they provide. Come buy some super rare and unique comics, while old men explain long-dead sci-fi shows to a younger man making that confused puppy face. Every Wednesday from 6 to 8 Eastern with Rex, John, and AR Comics. Comic Collectibles on The Experience. Comic culture and sales.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit ComicShopLocator.com to find a store near you.
Just thinking because of the conversation, how funny would have been in Quantum Mania if MODOK had hair and somebody pointed out to it, when did you get hair? He's like, or is that a toupee? It's part of the armor. And that Kang actually designed fake hair for him as part of the armor. That would have been funny. I could have seen that scene. All right, let's get back into it here on the Dan Wickline Show. We have still a ton of coverage to do. Now, one of the lesser-known Kangs was actually caught prior to jumping to being Rama-Tut. He was basically captured by the TVA, where he was made Chronomonitor 616, or 616, I guess. Now, he would eventually go rogue and be stripped of his powers because he kept using the stuff they gave him for personal gain. He escaped imprisonment and traveled into ancient Egypt on Earth 20051, where he impersonated the pharaoh Ramatut. He eventually came into conflict with the Fantastic Four from that Earth, and the conflict caused the TVA to notice the temporal disturbance. They arrived, captured him, and put him in an endless time loop while the Fantastic Four returned to their own time with all their memories of the incident removed. Now, this took place in a more recent comic, but give me one sec here, guys. I started getting the hiccups there. Now, so I don't know if we'll do anything with Chrono Monitor 616, but you never know, he might show up. Now, Kang has interfered in his own timeline, often jumping around, and it was bound to have an effect. In the case of one variant, he would learn about what Kang does when he was still a kid, a 16-year-old. And this 16-year-old Nathaniel decided to go back to the modern era looking to get help. Basically, he didn't want to be Kang. And when Kang shows up to try to help him become Kang, he escapes, heads back to the modern area looking for the Avengers. Only the Avengers aren't there. They've been disbanded. Now, he knew that Kang would try to follow him, and he was desperate for help, so he tries to break into Stark Industries looking for Tony Stark. Tony's not there, but he is able to recover the remains of the Vision. Now, he downloads the Vision's memories into his own suit of armor, and he finds this fail-safe program that Vision had created with the idea of locating the next generation of Avengers. This would lead to the formation of the Young Avengers, and Nathaniel would take on the name Iron Lad. Now, this would include Eli Bradley as the Patriot, Teddy Altman as Hulkling, Billy Kaplan as first Asgardian, then later Wiccan, Kate Bishop as Hawkeye, and Cassie Lang as a character called Stature. She doesn't really get her name in Quantumania. I think she's actually more like Stinger, which is another alter ego of hers. But she starts off as Stature. Now, while he worked with the team for a while, Kang was a constant threat to them. Now, Nathaniel would realize that he would need to return to the future and become Kang in order to save the present day. Now, upon Kang's next attempt, Nathaniel removed his armor and turned it into a new version of the Vision. He then attacked Kang while he was distracted by the other Avengers and ran him through with a sword. Ouch. And finally, he has the Vision open a time portal so that he can return to his own era. Now, he would appear a few more times, working with Kang on some things, working with Immortus on some things, but eventually he decides to follow the path he's supposed to be on and becomes a villain. And in this villain's version, he takes on the name Kid Immortus. Now, he was approached by a young Ravonna who revealed that in one possible future he would merge with Dr. Doom and Annihilus into a being called Doom the Annihilating Conqueror. Now, this creature would successfully kill 3 of the 4 Fantastic Four members, with only Johnny Storm escaping. So this Nathaniel Richards and Ravonna, this Kid Immortus, head back in time to try to make the merger happen sooner, because he wants the Fantastic Four dead sooner. And but Doom doesn't want to work with Kid Immortus. I mean, he doesn't believe any of this stuff until an older Johnny Storm shows up to warn the Fantastic Four. Then Doom goes, okay, there's something to it. And he ends up working with Kid Immortus and what would be a teen version of Annihilus. But when it comes to the important point of merging together into one creature, Doom's like, no, you guys are inferior. I ain't doing it. And this, of course, leads to Doom being defeated by the FF and Kid Immortus returning to his own time and just going on to becoming Kang. Now, we've seen a lot of indication. We haven't seen anything of Iron Lad or Kid Immortus, but we've seen a lot of indications of the Young Avengers. We've seen in shows like Hawkeye, we met Kate Bishop. In WandaVision, we got Wiccan and Speed. In Falcon the Winter Soldier, we got Patriot. And, of course, in Quantumania, we get Cassie Lang in a costume. So, now I should probably mention that the variant He Who Remains that we meet in Loki is not a variant that Kang uses in the comics. It might not be his name anyway, because there's a line he says that Miss Minutes likes referring to him as that. So he might have a different name, we don't know. But there is a character in the comics named He Who Remains that is tied to the TVA. He's not just a Kang variant. He's just not a Kang variant. So it might be that they're, like they did with the Immortus originally and decided to merge him in, they might be merging that character into being a Kang variant just because it makes good sense, you know? And since they're merging the TVA and Kang and all this stuff together. Now, a little more time. We got to speed through this. The last thing we should talk about is the Council of Kangs. As the name implies, the Council of Kangs features different variants of Kangs from across the multiverse. Together, they could be unstoppable force. These guys are very powerful, except they don't trust each other. And it turns out that the Kangs are often their own worst enemies. Yet, despite the treachery of Kang's past selves, the Council has kept coming back together. Now, the Council of Kang first appeared in 1986 in Avengers number 267. And at that time, when both Kang and Immortus were believed to be dead after the events of the Celestial Madonna saga, but in reality, Kang did perish, and yet he also lived because of the time-traveling exploits, all the variants and stuff. Now, he's created an almost infinite number of variants. However, Kang despised the idea that there were other Kangs in the multiverse. That's why Kang teamed up with two other Kangs who were like-minded to wipe out the rest of the council. Inevitably, this Kang would betray the other two Kangs also, his co-conspirators, because he wants to be the only Kang in existence. Unfortunately for Kang, Immortus engineered the entire plot with the help of an alternate version of Ravonna, and Kang was forced to absorb the memories of his murdered alternates and was sent insane before fleeing into the void of limbo. Now, despite the apparent destruction of the Council of Kangs, so that's where Harmon got the city of Rix. Yes, the Council of Rix, the Council of Reeds, the Parliament of Dooms, and the Council of Wells are all based off of this comic book of from 1986. Now, despite the apparent destruction of the Council of Kangs, an even larger gathering was brought together, but consisting of even more bizarre variants of the Conqueror throughout the galaxy. Now, this happened in Avengers 292. This was the introduction of the Council of Cross-Time Kangs. And unlike the previous Council of Kangs, their cross-time counterparts were not exclusively variants of Nathaniel Richards. Instead, they were aliens and creatures and even other humans who had assumed the mantle of Kang in their respective timelines. This was an even greater affront to Kang than the previous council. That's why Kang destroyed the Council of Cross-Time Kangs in Avengers the Terminatrix objective. And to pull that feat off, Kang assumed control of the temporal monster known as Aelith, who also appears in the Loki series. So that is a pretty deep dive into Kangapalooza. That is all the different variants that we're likely to come across. And you got a basic gist of what they're about and the Council of Kangs. I'm getting the feeling that we're going to see those variations pop up in different places. I was talking the other day that I think that since they are doing a Fantastic Four movie, and you don't necessarily want to do Doctor Doom after the previous ones all had Doctor Doom, you want to do somebody different. There are a lot of villains that the FF could use, but being that we're in the middle of the multiverse saga, it would make sense that it's Rama Tut is the villain. So we get an introduction to Kang, a Kang variant, but we also get a time-traveling version of the Fantastic Four, so we could start, in the 1960s and move to ancient Egypt and end up in modern day and take care of the fact of where the hell has the Fantastic Four been all this time. But I think Rama Tut's a possible villain for the Fantastic Four movie. We got Victor Timely. We got a few others showing up. The Cyborg one might be the chronometer guy, or he might show up in Loki. But I think we're going to start seeing Kangs pop up in other places in the multiverse. Sometimes maybe behind the scene villains like Mr. Griffin, and sometimes as overt villains like Rama Tut. So I just think they're going to really push these things. Producer JD says, I still really hope they start with the FF as stuck in the negative zone since the 60s. I love that idea, and that's how I would have done it. The problem with that is the last Fanfortistic or whatever that really bad one was, it used the negative zone, and I don't think they're going to use the negative zone or Annihilus. So that's why I thought they might pop up in the quantum realm, like they've been trapped in the quantum realm and they are rescued. But if they end up time traveling, dropping back to the past, and then coming to the modern day on their time back, that would also solve the problem. Had no idea that was supposed to be the negative zone. Yeah, that's supposed to be the negative zone. They don't even travel to space in that Fantastic Four movie. They go to the negative zone, and that's where they get their powers. How screwed up is that? Okay, guys, I think I am out of time. We're still figuring out what tomorrow's show is going to be. It may be a report from Kyle at Comics Pro, or it may be filler, whatever I come up with, or it might be a Ask Me Anything day. We haven't done one of those, have we? So we will do one of those soon. Yes, or it could be a knitting tutorial, but we would have to find a way to make sure Ed's here. So, all right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Stick around for Comics Collectibles with Rex and John, and they've got some great books coming up, and big lineup, new shows, 3T, the trivia show with Pat Shand. There's 360 Comics, and, of course, Kicking It with Henri, full night here on The Experience. See you guys tomorrow.
Do you remember what it was like when you were a little kid and you got a letter in the mail? Now imagine that letter was filled with information about your favorite shows, pop culture questions, links to things you're going to want to see later, and even sneak peeks at upcoming programming here on The Experience. That's what the EXP mailing list is. Every week, we send you sneak peeks, information, and all of the relevant links for all of the shows you want to see. Sign up now on our website or scan the QR code that's on your screen right now.